Another change that has happened with this explosion of screen time in the lives of young people is their physical safety has changed as well. That young people are 50% less likely to die in car accidents, to act out violently or be victims or perpetrators of violent crime. Teen pregnancy has dropped 50%. They may be sending each other, pictures, but less ones are getting pregnant for sure. And finally, even drug and alcohol use has decreased. So we'll talk about whether there is a new addiction, but I think we do want to acknowledge that in a lot of ways kids are physically safer. And of course, the one way that that's not true is the risk of suicide, which has risen sharply in the last 10 years, nearly double what it was. Now the second leading cause of death in teens, and there are some correlations with screen habits. So thank you so much. That was fantastic. We do have some questions, and a couple of the questions do have to do with the nature of the data, which is correlational, right? And so so one question is, is there any way we can make a causal connection between technology and these changes? Could there be other forces at work? Helicopter parenting, lack of public transit, gross increases in economic inequality, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great question. So I always want to acknowledge, I didn't come to that conclusion that technology probably played a big role in those increases in mental health issues quickly or lightly. There are a lot of factors to consider. Generational and trends research is inherently correlational. You can't do a random controlled experiment. You can't randomly assign people to be born at different times. So you have to go on the data that you have. A lot of those other trends don't line up in terms of the time scale. So income inequality, yes, has risen, but the biggest increases in income inequality in the US happened earlier. They happened between 1980 and 2000. And then it's actually kind of leveled off since 2012. It's still increased a little bit, but it's nothing compared to the previous increases. And you look at the data, there wasn't a whole lot happening until 2012, and then it goes up. So that, it doesn't really, that part doesn't line up. Helicopter parenting and overprotective parenting, that is a little bit of a stronger candidate, although those changes began more like the 90s and kept going. You could make a tipping point argument. I think it's a little more likely that has something to do with it. But it still doesn't show that compelling change, right around 2012 in the way that technology does. And I'll also mention, there's always that question of, is it depression that's causing screen time or screen time that's causing depression? Yep. And there's, fortunately, just in the last few years, more and more experimental research looking at that question. And most of it's on social media, and most of it does point in the direction of it's probably some of both, but there is some evidence to suggest, yeah, it really is social media use leading to depression rather than the other way around. There's also several longitudinal studies suggesting that. Those are a little more conflicting than the experimental studies, but the experimental studies do point to some role of causation.